This afternoon, we're going to start off with a discussion around a development incentives review report. And today we have our consultants, Mr. Craig Ferguson, principal at Parcel Economics, and Mr. Ryan Taylor, associate at Parcel Economics. And they're going to present their findings and recommendations regarding the incentives review. There's also a supplementary staff report in your agenda package with a recommendation to implement the report findings and for staff to return to Growth Committee at a future meeting with an implementation proposal. And Housing Manager Andy Reid is also here to speak to that. So we'll start off with handing it over to Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Taylor.
Great, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So good afternoon, Chair and members of the Growth Committee. As was mentioned, my name is Craig Ferguson. I'm a principal at Parcel Economics, and I'm here today with my colleague Ryan Taylor, who's also with Parcel Economics. We've been retained by the City of St. John to prepare a development incentives review. So the purpose of the study is to assist the city in better understanding how the current suite of housing incentives is meeting the city's goal of delivering more housing, and whether new incentives are required to increase the supply of housing going forward. So as it was just mentioned, I want to highlight this report in front of you today, as well as the presentation, are being received for information, with a final determination of incentives being brought forward in the future to Growth Committee and Council at a later date. Is my slide presentation up?
No, it's not.
Okay, do you want me to share that, or can that be provided on the screen?
Please.
Okay, just bear with me for a second then.
Just a reminder to everybody that we have to use the mics. Yeah.
Actually, Ryan, would you be able to share the presentation?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Yeah, sorry about that. That way I can see my notes as I go through.
There it is.
Aaron, can you zoom in? There you go. Thank you. Appreciate that. If you go to the next slide. So I'm going to start off with some context. Ryan, if you go to the next slide, please. So, as you're aware, like many municipalities across Canada, there are challenges facing the housing market in St. John. The combination, accelerating population growth in recent years has increased demand for housing, while at the same time, rising construction costs and a constrained labor supply have limited the supply of new housing going forward. So as shown on this chart, well, historically, housing construction, which is the blue line, has generally matched population growth, which are the green bars. There has been a mismatch in recent years, with population growth outstripping housing growth by a wide margin. And this mismatch has led to housing supply challenges in the city. Brian, if you go to the next slide, please. So as part of our analysis, we also reviewed past housing incentives provided by the city. So St. John has a long history of providing incentives for housing, and these incentives were last reviewed in 2010. So the table on the right summarizes incentives for 10 recent projects in the city. So as shown, for these projects, the incentive enabled an increase in assessed value, which is shown in the green bars, is the increase in assessed value between pre-incentive and post-incentive, while the red dot shows how many years it took back to pay the incentive based on the increased assessed value. Based on our review, in recent years, the value of these incentives has largely been recouped within 5 years of the development being completed. Ryan, if you go to the next slide, please. So in this slide, we summarize the purpose and scope of our study. So the primary purpose of the development incentive review has been to identify the types of development that are not financially viable on their own within the city. That is to say that a developer is likely not to move forward with the development as it would not provide a sufficient return on their investment. We conducted our study using a pro forma financial analysis, which is a common practice used in other jurisdictions. For these types of development that were determined not to be financially viable, we have calculated the amount of the incentive that would be necessary to encourage the development. So to inform our study, we conducted a variety of steps as outlined under the scope. So as it relates to the review incentives in pure municipalities, our project partners, Upland Planning, completed a review of housing incentives provided in pure municipalities across Canada. As it relates to the market sounding interviews, we conducted market sounding interviews with builders, developers, nonprofits, and lenders active in the St. John market to better understand the existing housing market conditions and how existing and past incentives offered by the city were being utilized. As it relates to the baseline development feasibility, we completed baseline financial feasibility analysis for 4 housing typologies and up to 2 tenures to determine baseline financial viability. Based on the outcome of this analysis, we identified incentives that could help in improving financial viability for these forms of housing. We then calculated the amount of the incentive that could stimulate development. Finally, we provided a series of recommendations to be considered when determining incentives within the city. Go to the next slide, please, Ryan. So as it relates to the baseline financial viability, the next slide. As I just noted, we determined baseline financial feasibility for 4 building types in up to 2 tenures in St. John. So this included townhomes, where we looked at ownership townhomes, as there were not many examples of purpose-built rental townhomes. We looked at mid-rise apartments, which include buildings up to 6 stories and are characterized by wood frame construction. And for this, we looked at ownership and rental tenures. We also looked at high-rise apartments, which are characterized by concrete construction, where we also looked at ownership and rental tenures. And then finally, vacant buildings, which were these were buildings considered to be on the city's dangerous and vacant building list. And for these buildings, we've assumed that the buildings are purchased and renovated before units are rented. So as shown in the colored circles on the right, only the mid-rise, so this table on the right shows the baseline financial viability for these different forms of housing. So as you can see, only the mid-rise rental, which is shown as the green dot, is viable in the baseline. However, high-rise rental and vacant buildings, shown as the yellow circle, are considered kind of on the cusp of financial viability. So there are examples of where it could work and where it couldn't work, but they're just on the cusp of financial viability. Whereas ownership townhome units, ownership mid-rise, and ownership high-rise typologies are not considered to be financially viable in the baseline analysis. So these types of developments are unlikely to move forward without financial incentives. Next slide, please, Ryan. In addition to these baseline scenarios, we're also asked to consider a sensitivity analysis for 2 additional built forms. So this included modular construction, where we looked at townhomes and mid-rise apartments, as well as providing ground floor commercial space in mid-rise and high-rise apartment buildings. So those are just 2 examples of modular construction in the photo to the top right, and then ground floor commercial in the building to the bottom right. Our findings highlight that both scenarios reduce financial viability. So the developer would be worse off with incorporating these typologies into their building. So while modular housing does reduce construction timelines, there are higher costs currently associated with this form of development. For example, the cost to rent a crane to assemble the buildings. For the ground floor commercial, the lease rates associated with non-residential space are lower than residential units, which reduces financial returns. So our analysis identified that to promote these forms of housing, incentives may be necessary. Next slide, please, Ryan. So as it relates to incentives, if you go to the next slide. So based on our scan of other jurisdictions, our market sounding interviews, and discussions with city staff, we identified 4 incentives for further testing, which are highlighted in the top row of this table. So these include a modular construction grant, a ground floor commercial grant, commercial grant, a building permit waiver, and a development incentive review. And for the development incentive review, we considered not only upfront grants, but also grants paid over a 5 and 10-year period to determine the difference. So as shown in the table, certain incentives are applicable to certain types of housing. So for example, for townhomes, there's no ground floor commercial grant because it wouldn't be possible to provide ground floor commercial uses within a townhouse unit. And it's also important to note that for the development incentive, the far right column, there is some overlap with existing city incentive programs, including the construction grant challenges grant, for townhouse units, the large building incentive for the high-rise rental, and the vacant building incentive. And then you'll notice that next slide, please, Ryan. So in looking at each of these programs more closely of the 4 incentives that we just listed, for the modular grant, it will result in a grant amount of nearly $45,000 per unit for a townhouse unit and $16,800 per unit for a mid-rise rental apartment building. So the higher incentive for the townhouse unit is associated with this form of development not being financially viable in the baseline analysis, as was shown earlier with the red dot in the previous slide. So for the ground floor commercial grant, the incentive amount varies from $45 per square foot of gross floor area to $63 for a mid-rise building to $63 per square foot for the high-rise building, where this incentive would only be applied to the space in the ground floor commercial rather than the entire building. Go to the next slide, please, Ryan. So as it relates to the building permit waiver, so these costs typically only amount to about 1% of the total development budget to build a building. So while waiving building permits does improve financial viability, the improvement is generally not enough to encourage development that is otherwise not financially viable. So it doesn't kind of get it across the finish line in terms of what it needs to achieve the appropriate return. Therefore, the building permit waiver on its own is unlikely to unlock new housing supply. Next slide, please, Ryan. As it relates to the townhouse development incentive on this slide, as noted earlier, in the baseline scenario, townhouses are generally not considered to be financially viable. This is generally consistent with recent construction activity in the city. While for many years, townhouse units were a significant form of new housing construction in St. John, in recent years, there has been far less housing construction. And based on our market sounding interviews, in many cases, this is due to the remaining sites for townhouse development being encumbered by rock and swamp. So there's higher costs associated with development than it has been historically. So based on our analysis, to achieve a return of 30%, which is based on our experience in other jurisdictions, as well as discussions with developers in the St. John region, a development incentive of approximately $14,800 per unit could be necessary. So to provide context, this amount of the incentive that we've calculated is generally in line with the existing construction challenges grant, which amounts to about $12,500 per unit for a 4-unit townhouse development. Therefore, we recommend continuing the construction challenges grant and potentially consider expanding this grant to all townhouse developments within the city to help promote development. Next slide, please, Ryan. In determining the development incentive for high-rise rental, we targeted a 10% return, which we consider to be the minimum return that the developer would be willing to accept before moving forward with the development. And this is also consistent with what lenders, the minimum return that lenders would be willing to accept when a developer comes in looking for a loan. So as shown on the right, this results in an incentive of about $6,000 per unit as it relates to the upfront grant. The table on the right. We have also considered, like I mentioned, a 5-year and a 10-year incentive. So this is a development incentive that would pay a fixed amount for a 5-year period or a 10-year period. So as shown, the annual grant for a 5-year is about $1,700 per unit. And for a 10-year, it's about $1,100 per unit. So it's less of a financial outflow for the city on a per unit basis in the first year. However, if you look at the amount of the grant in aggregate, for a 5-year grant, it's $8,300 per unit and $11,500 per unit for the 10-year grant. So it's more expensive in aggregate to provide the grant over a 5 and 10-year period, but in terms of year-over-year cash flow, it's less expensive. If you go to the next slide, Ryan. So for the vacant building incentive, we've identified an incentive of about $6,300 per unit to promote financial viability, where our analysis assumes that someone purchases the buildings, then undertakes renovations to create 3 rental units, which are then rented out at market rates. So for this incentive, we've only assumed an upfront grant, as the grant amount for this type of development are typically less than a mid-rise or high-rise building and would help with cash flow for a smaller developer that might be taking on this type of project. Next slide, please, Ryan. So this slide provides a summary of the development incentives for modular construction, ground floor commercial, and building permit waivers. And hopefully it's not too small, but I know there's this chart also shows up in our report. So this shows the development incentive on a per unit basis, as well as the aggregate amount of the incentive for the entire building. So as shown, the ground floor commercial and building permit waivers are the least expensive to provide of the incentives we've identified among these 3. Go to the next slide. So this summarizes the development incentives, the 4th group of incentives we considered. And it also includes an upfront grant, is the first column on the left, a 5-year grant and a 10-year grant, and it breaks it out by the unit types. So for townhouse units, we've only considered an upfront grant, as this is easier to administer for the ownership tenure. For the mid-rise development, we have not considered a financial incentive, as our baseline analysis showed this was financially viable, and this is also consistent with recent construction activity in the city, where a lot of it has been dominated by mid-rise rental. And then for vacant buildings, as I mentioned before, we only considered an upfront grant, as the grant amount is typically lower in aggregate and could help improve cash flow for the smaller developers that are typically taking on these types of projects. Next slide, please, Ryan. So we've also looked at the fiscal impact on the municipality, because I mean, there's going to be an impact on municipal finances of providing these incentives to increase the housing supply. So our analysis is based on the city recouping the incentive via property taxes following the completion of the building. So there would be an increase in assessed value of the building associated with the development, and then how long would it take to recoup the incentive based on that incremental increase in the assessed value. So the table on the right, which I apologize, that's a bit small as well. The bars represent the amount of time it would take to recoup the value of the incentive, with the longest bars taking the most amount of time to recoup. So as shown, the modular construction grant, which is the top bar, is expected to take the longest amount of time to recoup, and that's due to the fact that that's the largest incentive that was considered. By comparison, the ground floor commercial grant and the building permit waiver are expected to take less time, the least time to recoup. Those are the smallest bars on the chart. Next slide, please. And then again, I'm sorry. So based on our analysis, we prepared 7 recommendations that should be considered by the city in developing a suite of incentives to promote new housing development. So our first recommendation is to complete a detailed cost-benefit analysis for incentives based on what the city decides to go forward with. So our analysis that we've identified here is the maximum incentive that we consider necessary to promote development of the various typologies. So it's not to say the city has to kind of go up to that maximum amount. So once the city identifies specifics of the program, including the incentive amount, the timing of the payout, and other parameters, we recommend a detailed cost benefit analysis be prepared to support the business case for the new incentive. Our second recommendation is to not incentivize multi-unit ownership housing or mid-rise rental housing at this time. So the reason we've recommended not to incentivize mid-rise ownership housing, so condominium apartments, is because there's not a strong determination of market demand out there. So it was hard for us to identify what a reasonable price would be. And because there may not be sufficient market demand, at this time we don't recommend moving forward with this incentive. And then for mid-rise rental, we didn't recommend an incentive for that because it was financially viable in the base case analysis.
Sorry, let's go.
So our third recommendation is to maintain the construction grant challenge to assist with challenging sites and potentially, as I mentioned before, expand the incentive for townhouse units across the city to promote financial viability and increase the supply of housing. Next slide, please, Ryan.
Yeah.
Our fourth recommendation is to maintain the existing affordable housing grant and consider increasing the grant amount where possible, as we identified in our analysis that even with the city's grant as well as funding from the federal and provincial government, there is still a gap in providing affordable housing. So there may be an opportunity to increase this grant amount in the future with further discussions. Our fifth recommendation is there is the potential for a time-based incentive to stimulate additional demand for housing. So in our peer review of municipalities, we identified that there were some municipalities that had a sunset clause in the grant of, say, a year or two or more, and this helped pull forward demand in order to address short-term housing challenges. So this could also be an option for St. John. Next slide, please. Our sixth recommendation is to index the incentive amounts to ensure they're relevant with changing market conditions, such as rising construction costs. So one option for indexing the grant amount is to use this Statistics Canada Building Construction Price Index, which is produced quarterly by Statistics Canada. And there are examples of other municipalities and other jurisdictions that are indexing, whether it be development charges or things of that nature, to this index. And our seventh and final recommendation is to review the incentives regularly to ensure that they're achieving their intended results. So this could include a 2 or 3 year review cycle, subject to staff capacity, to review the incentives and what they're achieving.
I'm going to wait to the end.
And that's great timing, actually, because that's the end of the presentation. So happy to answer any questions you may have at this point.
Okay, thanks very much, Craig. Do we have any questions, Councillor Ogden?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. When I looked, do you know where our numbers are? We seem to be building lots of buildings or apartments. I keep hearing from people $2,000, $2,200, and there are apartments that have some empty space. Just a sec, please. Okay. So we seem to have a lot of apartments that have like $2,000, $2,200 and rentals, and with some vacancies. So we're starting to do well there. But do you have any idea of how many units we need that are affordable? I like Fredericton and Moncton's wages and benefits are higher than ours, so they can afford to pay higher rents. But St. John's wages and benefits are lower. But I keep getting the impression, in my neighborhood anyway, that there's still a huge demand for affordable housing. Is the demand changing any in St. John from your analysis?
So as part of our analysis, through you, Chair, as part of our analysis, we did look at what the market need for affordable housing is, but I do believe the city has undertaken studies in the last number of years that identified what the need for affordable housing is. I just don't have the number in front of me.
Okay, the other question I have, you were talking about Rock. This is an old city, oldest incorporated city in the country, and there's all kinds of homes that have been built on Rock. It didn't stop people in the past. I've own a home right now with a walk-in basement and everything. And you probably couldn't put a full basement in. But I don't see how rock is a hindrance if you're not putting in basements, especially today. We were painting a building one day and I talked the owner into tearing it down, and he built 2 little homes there because I told him the laws have changed, and he put in a slab. You know, like those wartime housing, which we built 46,000 of in Canada over 20 years, were based on the Cape Cod, and they have a small upstairs and a basement. But I think today there's a demand for a slab and like a 2-bedroom apartment on top of a slab. But I think with all our rock, because there's all kinds of places in the city that used to have housing, that when urban renewal came in, it took the housing down, but the housing was never replaced. Very few of it anyway. So I don't know why housing can't be built there again. I mean, beautiful views. You know, like you look at rock as a negative, but the views that some of our communities have in St. John, like, you know, we're not just a flat city, we're a city with character. So I think you're approaching the rock in a negative way where we should be approaching it in a positive way. And I think if you look at the amount of housing that we once had in the city compared to now, rock was not a detriment. So I would argue with your assessment on the rock as being detrimental.
Do you want to
Okay.
speak to that, Amy?
I can speak to that a little bit through you, Chair, to the councillor. I mean, that question definitely would be out of scope for the folks that we have visiting with us today, but we do have a construction challenges grant. Even if you're building a slab, you know, you're gonna have to remove some rock potentially, but you know, there's opportunity there, councillor, and there are grants in place if people do find themselves running into that situation.
I just don't like.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Craig. The only thing that I thought I might add is, you know, we talked about different kinds of incentives, and this would only really apply to Jerry and Donna and Councillor Darling's area. But when we're trying to increase density in our uptown area, for example, we need to sort of help developers in terms of lay down space and, you know, parking spaces. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be a financial handout necessarily, but if you're doing a 10-unit or 10-story apartment building, maybe with that comes 4 parking spaces free of charge from the city for your lay down, for your crane setup or whatever. And if you're doing like a 2, maybe you get 1. You know, but something along those lines I think would be helpful as well, because in your area, for example, Your Worship, that's what the only way you're going to be able to build is if you use those spaces. So I'll just leave it at that, and if there's, go ahead.
I would just say quickly that I'm grateful for the report, because I think in some ways it gives credence to what you are doing now, and then, you know, it offers those guiding principles as you go forward. So I'm really happy to have it and appreciate the presentation. So thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, I'd echo those. Right?
I'll move a recommendation we receive for information.
Okay, Councillor Darling, on the question, all those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, now we'll move on to 7.1. Amy?
Thank you, Deputy. The next item is a presentation by our Director of Development and Community Services, Chris McKeel, and he's going to share some information about development activity in the first 4 months of this year. Great news that Chris is going to share this afternoon, and information in our infographic that is out publicly now. Thank you.
It's the growth infographic.
Thank you, Commissioner Poffenroth. Good afternoon, Chair and members of Growth Committee. I'm pleased to provide this month's Growth at a Glance report summarizing development activity January through April 2025. The first 4 months of 2025 represent the strongest start to a year we've ever recorded in St. John. We've received 207 building permits, significantly exceeding our 5-year average of 185 building permits for the same period. And the value of construction projects has reached a record $185.5 million, nearly 5 times our 5-year average of $39.7 million. 2 new schools have contributed significantly to this momentum. The North End Elementary School is under construction, and the South End K-8 school is currently under review.
Yeah, no, she
These 2
schools,
school projects together account for just over $100 million. Importantly, even excluding the 2 schools, development activity for the year sits at $84.2 million. So this is still the highest on record for the first 4 months of any year, and 26% above, 26% higher than the next closest year, which was 2017. This shows that our growth is broad-based and diversified, not dependent on any one project or sector. The strong start is being driven by activity across all sectors: industrial, residential, commercial, and institutional. Confidence remains high, and we're seeing developers aggressively advancing new applications. While 2025 is already record-breaking, there are a number of major developments not yet reflected in our permit value. For example, the museum redevelopment, we are expecting to receive a full building permit application shortly, and the next-gen pulp and paper expansion, we're expecting full application shortly, as well as a number of other multi-unit residential construction projects. Year to date, we've seen the creation of 144 new residential units, above our 5-year average of 126. We're currently sitting at a total of 579 new units as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund. So we're well on our way to achieving our target of 1,124 new units over 3 years. We are seeing a large number of residential buildings being constructed across the city. There are also 14 additional developments in the pipeline, which together propose over 1,100 new residential units. Altogether, more than 416 residential units are either under construction or nearing completion citywide. The volume of activity signals confidence in that St. John is strong, both in public and private sectors. Period from January through April 2025 has not only been record-setting, but it's also only the beginning in what we expect to be a milestone year for development. With several large projects still to be permitted, with a wide variety of residential, commercial, industrial, institutional investments, we expect the momentum to continue well into Q3 and Q4. I'll now take any questions from or comments from the committee.
Hey, Chris, any questions? Councillor Hudson, and then the mayor. Go ahead. Go ahead, Don. Go.
I was just going to say, can I get a couple dozen copies of that? So I want to take to the state of the.
Say that all again.
Can I get a couple of dozen copies of that? I want to take it to the State of the Region address. I mean, it's not that I'm bragging per se, but it'd be nice to have them on all the tables.
Yeah.
The postcard size.
Yeah, I'm sure to hand them out.
Like
No,
that one
it's great news.
that postcard we had this morning.
It's right. Great news. Thank you.
Okay.
Chris, one thing that you didn't really elaborate on, but I think the public's really interested in, from what I hear, is that I just heard it last night, that the ball hockey place that was on Manawings Road is now relocated to an industrial park, because there's a lot of enthusiasts about that, and that the progress is still being made on St. Vincent's School and St. Patrick's School, because those are 2 things that you do hear what's happening there. So I think that's good news publicly that people will want to hear.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I guess from my perspective, I think it's an awesome report. Absolutely awesome. I mean, 185 million in construction projects, and the average 5-year average for the same period is 39.7. Like that's just incredible, and 144, residential units created and 1,100 potential. What I would like to see is a breakdown, if we can, of how many units are actually homes, garden homes, townhouses, that type of thing, because we are getting a lot of, inquiries as to why there's apartments but not many homes. And I think that's starting to turn. And I think our younger residents would be happy to see that it is. So in the future, if that could be broken down, that'd be muchly appreciated. So if there's no other comments, I'd take a motion to receive and file. Donna and Barry, on the question, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. You're good, Chris. And they'll go away.
Yeah. Yes, the next item is back to Mr. McKeel to give us an update about our second annual developer symposium was held March 12th. And Chris is going to go over the findings and how the symposium went.
Thank you, Commissioner Poffenroth. I'll take a few minutes to provide a brief update on the 2025 Developer Symposium, which took place on March 12th at the Trade and Convention Center. This was our second annual Developer Symposium, and attendance was very strong, with 47 developers and consultants joining us at the early morning event. The format was similar to last year, beginning with a networking breakfast followed by 4 presentations. The 4 presentations included an overview of the recent adoption of the zoning bylaw reform, the official launch of the city's updated land divestment strategy, a presentation from CMHC on funding programs available for developers, and a regional market insights update from Envision St. John. The overall feedback, both during the event and in follow-up conversations, was very positive. Many attendees said the networking opportunities were particularly valuable, especially for developers new to St. John looking to connect with local consultants, planners, and city staff. We also distributed a formal feedback survey and received 11 responses. While the sample size was small, some themes emerged. Continued interest in development incentives, particularly those that address infrastructure gaps such as water, sewer, and road access, the cost and complexity of rock breaking or excavation, and enhanced grants for nonprofit housing sectors. Lastly, the presentation on CMHC's design catalog received good support, with developers encouraged by the potential for faster approvals and reduced design costs. In summary, this year's Developer Symposium was a success, strengthening key relationships, delivering important policy updates, and gathering meaningful feedback. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions? Light.
Yeah, the Developer Symposium, that's put on through Envision?
That's put on through the City of St. John.
Through the City of St. John, okay. Thank you.
Barry.
I just think it's a fabulous idea to be doing that. Whoever came up with it, my hat's off to you. I'll kiss your ring, because I think that's a great idea to be doing that.
So that's great. I'm glad that we're doing it too. I mean, we've been doing it for what, 2 years?
This is the second year.
Second year, yeah. No, so it's awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate it. Can I get a motion to receive and file? Barry and Mayor, on the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, motion's carried. And we're on to 7.3 or 2. Oh.
Just jump back to the symposium for the second. It was one of your items on your strategic plan. So it was your idea, Councillor.
Oh, you mean mine first?
Well, it was a council's idea. It's council's idea.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. I remember having that discussion.
All of your idea. That's right. On to the next, the last presenter here this afternoon. We're handing it over to your growth manager for BCO Lima, and he'll be providing an update on the City Market Strategic Plan and the implementation where what we're doing here in 2025 and looking forward to 2026. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Growth Committee. Today I'd like to present on the strategic plan implementation. I'll provide some updates. I will stick with my notes just to respect the time. So I will start off with some considerations, implementation considerations of the city market. As per the strategic plan. So the city market has been operated by the city since 1876 and prior iterations of the market since 1785. A governance review of the market is already underway and expected to be concluded later this year. This review will help ensure the city market meets the continued needs of the community, vendors, and visitors. The city market is not a regionally funded facility, as its operations and expenditures are fully paid by the City of St. John. The strategic plan had an advisory committee whose work concluded when the city adopted the strategic plan. The plan now calls for an implementation advisory body to be established, and that will take place once the governance review is complete. The budget associated with implementing the city market strategic plan is estimated to be between $5 to $10 million. City market has already set aside $500,000 and will seek funds from other levels of government to fully capitalize the implementation of the plan. So moving on, still with the implementation considerations, indeed staffing capacity in 2024 presented some challenges while the development of the planning phases were ongoing. Finding a suitable candidate with the appropriate skill set has led us to successfully hire the implementation manager, who is present here today, Mr. Matthew Dempster, to support the execution of the strategic plan. The city market is a national site, a national historic site with an annual facility maintenance budget of approximately $200,000 yearly. The City of St. John maintains a high-quality facility management team who are responsible for maintaining all city facilities, including the city market. The governance review is examining options for accelerated maintenance and capital work at the city market. So to the next slide, I'm going to outline with those notes on the screen on the items that the strategic plan calls and action items that have been completed to date. So, as I mentioned, implementation manager hired in March 2025, who's present today in the meeting, bringing lots of experience, including property restoration, business, and all the skill set that it's needed for the moment. And I'd like to highlight the numbers you see on the screen. These are items out of the strategic plan. So I'll start off with the 1.1 strategic plan item, which is implementing core hours Monday to Saturday at the market. That's completed. Strategic plan 1.9 as part of continuing to review the enhancing of vendor placement throughout the market. Relocation of 2 current vendors is scheduled and confirmed. Strategic plan 2.2. Design requests have been made for the new kiosk and market eating area and layout for front of the market vendor space, also completed. 2.3 and 2.4 items from the strategic plan, wayfinding maps and market layout displays are developed. Item 2.7 out of the strategic plan, review the required signage standards for vendors. Strategic plan item 7.3, establish updated leasing procedures, including business plans, credit checks, and establish vendor mix reviewed by internal team, also completed. Carry on with completed items. Strategic plan item 2.1, install one new kiosk as a sample of to expect. These are to be completed in 2025. Currently, this is undergoing, it's ongoing. Item 2.5 and 5.9, design and cost analysis of new bathrooms. Item 3.3 of the strategic plan, requested quotes for bike racks to be placed at both ends of the market. Strategic plan item 4.5, install the Hooper timepiece, to be completed this year as well. Strategic plan item 5.6, requested pricing on water bottle fountains to install within the market. Strategic plan item 6.1, evaluate building for energy efficiency retrofits that may be required in collaboration with St. John Energy. Strategic plan item 6.3, review the potential for implementing green energy options. Strategic plan item 7.2, reviewing governance models for the city market. So these will continue. Next slide, with actions to be completed in 2025. Strategic plan item 1.4, fit up work required as new vendors are identified for the market. Strategic plan item 2.1, design work quotes and timelines to be determined for remodel of vendor stalls adjacent to the new seating area and solarium. Strategic plan item 2.6, design and cost analysis of new mezzanine area at south end of the market. Strategic plan item 3.5, review the current loading and unloading zones procedures for North Market, South Market, and Germain Street. Strategic plan item 5.8, review accessible parking availability. And as well as we are currently exploring funding options to support the capital changes. Next slide. These are items that are going to be undertaken in 2026. Again, out of the strategic plan, start off with the remodel of vendor space to allow space for main hall seating area. Strategic plan 1.12, develop a new marketing and communications plan in conjunction with the new brand development. Strategic plan item 2.1, construct new main hall seating area. Strategic plan item 2.2, replace the next run of booths with three new kiosks to allow for better flow and open sight lines throughout the market. Strategic plan item 2.8, purchase of new seating for the solarium and new seating area. Design and cost analysis of fresh food vendors, overall footprint, cooler space, required kiosk space. Strategic plan item 3.1, enhancements to be explored for South Market, including outdoor seating, improved light and PA system, add green spaces, adding local art to be on display throughout the space. Next slide. Continue of actions from the strategic plan to be completed in 2026. Strategic plan item 4.1, the 150th anniversary celebrations throughout the year. Strategic plan 5, which I will extend on next slide, about the 150th anniversary. Strategic plan 5, item 5.10, how to utilize point of sale system to create synergies between vendors and better promote market money gift card programs. And internal PA and lighting system installed already in City Market. So next slide. The 150th anniversary plans are underway, as mentioned. So an application is to be submitted for federal funding to celebrate this milestone. So a lot of work behind this right now. These are just some of the items, including celebrations throughout 2026, including cultural events at the market, creating a new brand specific to the market, restoring historical items and installing public art, events including musicians, local musicians, and also local artists, and making sure we enhance the visitor experience. As mentioned, the city will be submitting applications for federal funding, but are separate funding applications specifically for future capital funding as well.
Yep. Thank you for
One suggestion I'd make is that there's a collection of historical places around St. John. A lot of them have the plaques. I know that with the Marco Polo project, we went and got one, I think it was 40 years ago. And I presented a paper to Heritage Canada, Parks Canada, they worked together, about the collection of all the historical places. And I know Envision St. John is talking to them about this sort of urban historical park. One thing one of the historians at the Museum of Civilization, I don't even know what we call it anymore, said to me is that there's no place in Canada that we have celebrated the golden age of sail, because they have themes, themes about Indigenous people, themes about French Canadians and all that. And if we could tie the market in, because even when you look up, it looks like an inverted ship, and all our architecture in the city is related to that time period. And I believe it's the largest collection in North America, 19th century and Victorian homes. I think it's bigger than Savannah, Georgia, and Quebec City, which are the other two that they talk about. Maybe you should hook up with Envision St. John, because they are looking at that. And I told them about this paper I wrote years ago, and I put a color-coded thing about, if you look at the St. John Harbor and an area, it might be the most historic place in all Canada. You've got 14 years of Fort Latour, 14,000 years of Indigenous history. The island that used to be in the harbor was the central communication link for the whole province of Brunswick, which is all connected through the river system. So maybe you should talk to them, because this could become a national celebration all across the country, because I still maintain that we are the most historic place in the country, and cruise ship visitors and everything want historic and culture experiences. So just to pass that on, because it's around that same time period. Some people call it Victorian era, some people call it the Golden Age, but it's the same time period. Just a suggestion.
Through the chair to the council, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the recommendation.
Jerry?
Ladies first, you go.
Yes, I just have two quick questions. You said the core hours were already established. What are they?
The course is 10. They are 10 to 3.
10 to 3.
However, the market is open from 7 to 6, Monday to Friday, and Saturday it's a different timeline, which is 9 to 5.
And the other quick one I had was with the solarium seating. Like how will you try to organize that? Like it's a big slope, of course, right? Will the floor be flat? Don't, like I said, it's upstairs, or will you still sit on the slope, or do you have any idea? I can't remember what's in the kit.
The solarium is yet to be the concept design is yet to be developed. What we are right now is the sitting area would come first. I will keep you posted.
Sounds good.
Councilor?
Yeah, seeing the market falls within my ward. I'd like to recommend, and that's what I'd ask for recommendations, under 3.5 and 5.8, it says review the current loading and unloading zones, procedures for North Market, South Market, and Germain Street. Then 5.8 says review accessible parking available. I would like to suggest that where the 2 spots were taken out from in front of the Bank of Nova Scotia, which is the UNB, which were 15-meter spots that people used to use, run over the market, buy something, go back again, that you take the 3 spots on North Market and make them 15 meters. So, and then you can request that the city cars and the vendors don't park in them. And if there were meters, if they were 0, it would mean that they can be fined. Because who parks there now? There is 4 spots. It's the city staff parks there. They have the white cars with city emblems on them. I think they're city cars. And the staff parks there. So therefore, the market's being deprived of people that come and want to run in and grab something and run back out again. And then the wisdom of the city to take the 2 out over where the UNB was to make, I think, the streets straighter. But where the loading zone is, cars are there all day. Same car never moves. Trucks don't move. So if they put 15, pardon, Barry?
Good point.
If you took the 2 meters that you had across the street, which were 15-minute meters, and put 3 of them, I don't think you can get 4 in. Sometimes there's 4 cars there, but one's got its wheels up on the curb, right? If you put those meters there, people could actually use them to shop in the market, which is, to me, quite an asset to the market, because there's no place to park. South Market Street's under construction. You can't get up it. I don't even know why we even use it. To load and unload, there's naturally my old building where you come out of the garage on North Market. So they unload there, but they unload early in the morning. They don't unload there in the afternoon. Those that are, as a rule, those coming there come early in the morning, unload into the market. And then the garbage truck comes, I think, 6:30 or 7 in the morning to take the stuff out of there. So if they put the meters over there, first of all, you'd make money, which is, I think, what the city's trying to do at different times, make money. And people would have access to the market for 15 minutes at a time, instead of having the staff that works at the market and the staff that works for the city parking there all the time. You can't get a place to park. You got to park over where the Paramount Theater, along those places. So you can take that into consideration.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. I see Commissioner Paternotte was writing furiously here. So I think she got that. That's a good point. Okay, if I can get a motion to receive and file.
I do have a very quick question,
Oh, go ahead.
if I may. I just wanted to double check. So for the actions to be completed in 2025, are those listed in the order of priority that you're doing?
Not necessarily. There are things that are they have different timelines, and also even some items in 2026 that we're looking at. We're trying to strategically put them in order of not only priority but also respecting the timeline. So, yeah, no, and would love to see that visual at some point, because I'm a very visual person, especially for folks asking. It's a lot easier. Sure.
Thank you.
Good points.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we've got the mover and seconder.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
It's not concerning the city market, though. The Royal Bank just closed down in the North End. And I think there was 4 banking institutions that are now closed in the North End. I don't know who this would be directed to, but could we see if we could go and approach, I don't know, Bayview Credit Union or something to get a banking system in the North End? Because a lot of seniors have mentioned that they would like to have banking in the North End. Is there anybody that we would direct that to?
That'd be something we'd look to envision to be a part of. So on their real estate side. So that's something we can share with them.
Could you mention it to them?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Councilor Lowe, do you have your light on again, or no?
I'm sorry. I apologize.
No problem. So we're looking for an adjournment here. No. All in favor of adjournment? Receive and file. I'm sorry. Okay, now we'll look for adjournment. Jerry. Okay. All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you.